page. School board reports, does anybody have anything to report on?
I just wanted to report a little bit about the partnerships that Austin Public Schools and Austin Aspires have. As a new member of the Austin Aspires Board, I've come to realize how important that communication and co-working is. Some of the things that Austin Aspires does with the Austin Public Schools is supports early childhood screening, the BOT Club, Boys of Tomorrow, letters training. They were able to help support 2 staff members from the Austin Public Schools to get trained. Digital literacy training in the AID program, Aspiring Leaders of Tomorrow, tutoring, Mower County mentorship program, and the hotspots. So we are always talking about how we have to rely on our community partners, and we are so very fortunate to have this partnership with Austin Aspires. And I really have enjoyed being on that board and seeing all the wonderful things happening. So
That was great, Lisa, thanks. Anybody else? I just want to say, I've driven around a little bit, just looking at some of the things that have been going on, and those new playgrounds at Sumner especially look amazing. So I want to give a shout out to Buildings and Grounds and the teams that have been working diligently to get not only those 2 new playgrounds put together, but all of our buildings ready for the year. I think they work so hard over the summer, and I think a lot of that can easily go unnoticed. So shout out to all of our custodial staff and folks doing that work. All right. Our next item is our consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Cece, second by Kathy. Any discussion?
I just had a couple questions. For the special services report, Sherry, I know that one of the reports you submitted, you were extremely low on paras, but it looks like things have turned around in that regard.
Well, we're working on it. Sue Stark has actually been really instrumental in pulling together interviews with all of our building leaders and trying to get some of those positions filled. And so we're chipping away at it. We still have a little ways to go, but I would say we're not in a worse position than we've been for the last year. But we've had a hard time getting all of those positions filled, yes.
Okay, that's good. And then the 5 virtual speech clinicians and the Nexus Gerard no in-person school-based mental health services. So that's all gonna be virtual.
Yeah, unfortunately, that was a surprise that came at us from Gerard late in the game here. And so we're working on actually developing an RFP to try and find some other providers as well. And Gerard has indicated to us that as they recover some of their staffing situation, that they'll consider coming on site again as well. It's a labor shortage issue.
Right. So I guess my question is, how do the students and the parents feel about virtual versus in person? Have you heard anything?
I can tell you, I can speak to the speech situation because we've been living that for a year now. We had 4 virtual speech clinicians last year. That actually went much better than anticipated, and it's really the way of the world moving forward. I can tell you all of the districts around us are having similar issues. And we were just very strategic and planful in getting our processes set up. We have a lot of supports for those virtual services with our due process clerks available for the scheduling and printing and filing and so forth. We've really had an excellent applicant pool. We've been able to get some very talented speech clinicians. So in a way, it really opens up your applicant pool to be able to explore some of those virtual providers versus people that happen to be here locally in person. So I would say overall, it's gone better than anticipated.
Good, that's good. It's amazing what technology.
Yeah,
can do,
isn't it? Right, yeah.
Well, and if I can just jump in, I was super skeptical about how it would work with little ones. And the person that we had working at Woodson last year was outstanding, super engaged with the parents, really engaged with the kids on screen. It far exceeded my expectations. It's really working well.
Showed us how it can work.
Yeah.
Great, thank you very, very much.
All right, any other questions? We have a motion and a second, correct? Yes. All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Next action item is the request for the approval of our donations with Executive Director of Finance and Operations, Colin Lechtenberg.
Good evening, Chairperson DeBay, Dr. Page, and the rest of the board. It is my honor tonight to stand in front of you to walk through the donations we received. Just as a reminder, school districts receive donations from private individuals, public entities, and trusts. And these gifts we're about to go through, these donations do meet our board policy 706, acceptance of gifts. So it is our recommendation to approve them after we read these. So American Legion Post 91, $1,500, girls swim team. American Legion Post 91, $1,500, boys swim team. Lions Club of Austin, $200, AHS Jazz Band. American Legion Post 91, $1,000, adaptive bowling. Kiwanis Club of Austin, $285 to community education, More Than Pink program. United Way of Mower County and Work of Art, $500, community education, More Than Pink program. Keene Trust, $200, AHS, sorry, I just blanked on that verb. Sorry about that.
Austin Ayers.
Austin Ayers, sorry about that.
You're good.
So we're asking for you guys' approval tonight.
Can I get a motion to approve the donations? Motion by Carol, second by Becky. Discussion? We have a very generous community. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Our next item is our overview of the 25-26 budget planning timeline.
So one of the things we're working on with our communication and getting in front of the board is the timeline. I know you guys approved in June our adopted budget for this year. And one of the things we talked a lot about is we projected our enrollment. So what we're gonna do is starting in October, we will submit our first enrollment to Mars, will be October 1st, and we'll use that to start looking at where our enrollment was compared to what we had planned. So we'll work on that, we'll look at changes to supply accounts and other things that we had based on enrollments with the buildings. And then November, we're gonna go through, look at all the staffing changes through the November 11th board meeting, so anything that we hadn't planned to be hired, or we put in a certain dollar amount for hires, and then based on what their education is, those get changed out, so we will change those out. In November, you guys will have the audit in front of you, so we'll review where FY 24 year's audit ended, and then we will start meeting in the finance department November, December, just on changes, just bringing our stakeholders, our principals, our directors into the meetings, learning their budgets, going through it, and so this leads to a review the first week of January with myself and Amy, the controller, meet with Dr. Page the January 20th. We'll be in front of you guys January 27th for a draft presentation and then approval in February. It is key for us to hit these timelines because as we get to February, we'll then start talking about the next school year and where Congress is going, where our enrollment's going and that. So again, our goal is to continually put these timelines in front of you so that you guys know exactly when you're gonna hear about a revised budget, when we're gonna do our adopted budget, and those kind of timelines. It just helps plan for us, and then you guys know exactly what's coming out of the finance department. Any questions on this?
Doesn't sound like we have any questions, so we will say thank you for that update. And on to our Next agenda item, which is the request for the approval of the 24-25 adult meal charges, also with Dr. Tom Lefferberg.
So again, we're here in front of you, as we all know, the meal prices for students is free, with Minnesota Free Program. However, we are not allowed to subsidize meal programs for adults. So every year MDE comes out and they set the price for the minimum adult meal. So we're here in front of you guys tonight to request that our adult breakfasts go from $2.25 to $2.40 and from $4.95 for lunch to $5. And again, this is off the recommendation of MDE. So that is what we're recommending tonight.
And is there a motion to approve the increased meal charges?
So moved.
Motion by Kathy, second by Peggy. All right.
So I have a question then. So MDE, is it a suggestion or is it a required price?
It is the minimum amount they have set for us.
Okay, because once again, we've done it years and years, they say that we have to follow them regardless of the budget, that we've had just a substantial and healthy foods budget that continues to grow. So we will raise our prices in that we don't necessarily need the funding, but it's a request from the state to do that.
Yes, it is the minimum requirement that we have to have for those two prices, no matter what our fund balance is.
Thank you.
That's a good question.
So we're voting, but we really have to.
We're voting
vote.
in protest.
Because we could go high with them.
You can increase it.
Let's not do that. Gotcha.
All right, we have a motion by Kathy and a second by Peggy, right? All right, any other discussion? All those in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. All right, we're gonna turn the table over to Dr. Page with the review and request for the approval of our 3-year governance plan and 24-25 school board goals.
Thank you, Chair Debate, members of the board. Before you tonight is the 3-year board governance plan, and one of the board goals that came out of our retreat sessions that we had both with MSBA and Dr. Sherry Allen. So we've updated the board governance plan that runs through 26, 27, and then a draft that was of goals, or a board goal, that was discussed at last work session that could come forward and presented here tonight for your review and discussion.
Is there a motion to approve the 3-year governance plan and 24-25 school board goals? Motion by Peggy, second by CC. Conversation. I'm just gonna pull up the school board goal. I just want to say that goal out loud just because. So our 24-25 school board goal is that the ISD 492 school board will receive and analyze requested outcome data to enhance understanding of academic progress and the district's response strategies. Does that sound like a good statement, good goal for us for this year?
I do think it means that we're going to have to designate time in our work sessions to
Yes.
discuss what kinds of information we want to focus on per semester even. But just to have a discussion about where do we want to go so that we can direct Dr. Page and Corey to gather that information.
That's a good point. Thanks for calling that out. All right. We have our motion and our second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Anybody opposed? Motion passes. Next agenda item is the request for the approval of superintendent pages 24, 25 goals with Dr. Wu.
Thank you, Chair DeVay, members of the board. These were shared at our July work session. Every year, the school board reviews and approves the superintendent's goals. The school board and the superintendent established 2 to 3 goals, potentially even one for on professional development. The goals are outlined here are clearly aimed at improving student learning and the climate for student learning and other specific operational oversight areas. So if you recall, at our retreat, our 2 retreats, I should say, with MSBA and Dr. Allen, we had 2 areas that were focused. One was on communication, and the other parts were on culture within the school district. So these were presented with feedback and edits at our July work session.
Are you asking for feedback now before we vote on this? The only thing I would suggest is under the highly effective, the grading 4. I think in our discussions, we talked a little about, sorry, which one?
In the communication or?
No, I'm on the first goal.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe heading off some issues before they come to the table. So if you could add, always, or actively keeps, school board, staff, and community, informed, especially of topics and concerns, and this doesn't have to be in there, but that could escalate to a level where we're gonna end up talking about them anyway, kind of as upfront to some of that. So that would, I would appreciate that. You're doing a great job on the day-to-day communication, but just that foreseeing issues that could require us to discuss.
What are we using as a baseline? If we're going to look at rating him, if you will, an increase in communication effectiveness, what are we using as a baseline?
Current state?
Are we defining that so that we're very clear on what that is?
That's a great question. When I look at the rubric, I'm gonna put on my curriculum design hat here for a minute. When I look at a rubric like this, the goal, the basic goal is to be effective. Highly effective would be taking it to the next level, which we should all be striving for, which we probably have that expectation of Dr. Beach anyway. When you hear the word baseline, what are the characteristics of that type of communication?
To me, it would depend upon who it is he's communicating with and the message that is intended.
Okay.
I think we've seen in this last year especially that there are several instances of us being familiar with communication that has gone out several times to several audiences and still hearing, we didn't know, we didn't know, we didn't know. Is that?
So maybe the baseline is that we know that communication is going out. That's our baseline. We know that that's happening. Maybe from there, we start to identify, and I don't know, this is gonna probably start getting us into the weeds a little bit, but
It's not a decision that we have to make tonight, I think, but I
Yeah.
think before we start evaluating the work, we need to know
Yeah.
what it is that our expectation is
Mhm.
and the results that we want. If it's more communication, he can do more social media posts. I don't know how that's even possible, because
I don't think we're we're talking about the quality of communication from Dr. Page, because that is, oh.
Yep.
We
As is
all
one.
agree that he's a very good communicator. I think what we need to be thinking about is maybe, how do we help people get to his communications? How do we help them find it? Because it's there. It's in their emails, it's in social media, it's on phone, it's out there. And out there in print, how do we get people connected with it? So that they know that that's there. I don't know that that's specifically what this goal was about, but I feel like that's probably where, we as board members tend to feel, the most friction when it comes to potential phone calls that we'll receive from community members, right? Because we know that information is going out and that's there, but the other half of communication is receiving it, and how do we make sure people are hearing and receiving content? Baseline is communication is going out. I think what brings it to the next level is what Cece was talking about with the foresight to start thinking about or anticipating reactions. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Yeah. What do you think?
I think future telling wasn't in the interview,
I know it wasn't
but there has to be some
Yeah.
instinct there.
forecasting.
If I may,
Yes, please.
as far as baseline though, depending on what the evidence of performance are, so there'll be different artifacts that we submitted through the year that this could establish baseline. So, for future years, so.
That was a really good, deep question.
Just want to know what we're evaluating.
Yeah,
Based on
exactly. Anybody else? All right, can I get a motion to approve the 24-25 goals for Superintendent Page?
As amended with staff.
As amended with
School board
CC's recommendations for highly effective
actually effective.
and effective.
So,
All right, motion by Peggy. Second by Cece. Further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. All right, motion passes. Our next agenda item is the review and request for the approval of revised policy 438 consulting with Dr. Page.
Thank you, Chair, debating members of the board. The purpose of this policy is just to set forth the terms and conditions under which certain employees in our school district are granted leave to serve consultants for other organizations. So we put this policy in, I believe, 2 years ago. Just a clerical change. You'll see there the redline version is under number 1, the superintendent will approve, not the executive director of organizational development and administrative services. That position is not in our school district anymore, so we just wanted to make sure that that was updated. So just a clerical update.
So a motion to approve the approved policy 438 consulting.
So moved.
Motion by Kathy. Second by Carol. And I guess there's not going to be much discussion about this one. Oh, you, yeah?
never doubt CC. No. I'm going short, I thought I
So you would be the sole decider of, you've had too many days off.
Madam Clerk, call them, please.
Oh, gosh. So those kinds of conversations would be you and you alone.
Correct.
Okay, that's my question.
Alright. I took a look, see, we had this conversation about Robert's rules earlier, and I, yeah. Alright, any other questions? Comments, discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion passes. Okay, our next agenda item is a review and the request for the approval of revised policy 522, Title IX, sex non-discrimination policy, grievance procedure and process.
Chair May, members of the board, this is our Title IX Policy 522. In April of 2024, the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights released the latest version, what they call the final rule for Title IX. The 2024 final rule protects all students and employees from all sexual discrimination prohibited under Title IX, including discrimination based on sex stereotypes, orientation, gender identity, and sex characteristics. The 2024 final rule will also revise procedures that schools are to implement for Title IX grievances and related matters. The effective date of this is 2024 final rule is August 1st, 2024. Rationale for this policy change, or it's applicable and enforceable for Minnesota schools. The changes are highlighted from MSBA, the Title IX and Policy 522 update document also attached. Due to the significant nature of the changes to Policy 522, the 2024 revisions are not shown in red line because there were so many of them. I talked with Terry Barrow last week at MSBA, and we usually have a red line version of these. They started that, and they had shared with me is there was so many that they just did a complete rewrite on there. So if you're used to seeing those like you just saw in the policy before, they didn't have these in here. So the recommendation is that the approval of the revised policy 522, our Title IX, tonight.
Is there a motion to approve revised policy 522, Title IX?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Peggy, second by Casey. Conversation. Yeah.
Just procedurally, in the past, we've had first reading and then second reading. Is there?
Yes. Yes.
Based on that?
Yeah, similar to our other policies that we've done in our, we do have a procedure in our policies for approval of them for one read, in policy 208. So the last meeting, I believe we had, I'm not sure how many, Sharon would know. So at the start of the school year and August 1st in our next board meeting, not until the regular September, we're using that procedure.
I have some questions. So I listened to the MSBA webinar twice. So I could totally try and get my brain wrapped around this. Because I wasn't here with, I think, the initial policy. So, and I had to print it out because it's 34 pages long. So, on the webinar, it said that, there's several states that are, challenging this. There's also, it talked about a Moms for Liberty and some other parent organizations. So I guess one of my questions is, because there are people and organizations that are not in support of this policy, by passing it, would we have any potential ramifications or anything if an individual or an organization chose to challenge this?
Yes, not yes, but to respond to that. So that was part of the webinar information, and what was shared at that time is, we don't know. Was shared from MSBA. What's different from, I think, those other states in Minnesota is we also have the Human Rights Act in Minnesota. So that is another piece to this that's going to be a differential from the states that are contesting this. And right now, there isn't any injunctions in the state of Minnesota for that.
Right, and they did say that this pretty much mirrors, the human rights policy, so that's why Minnesota isn't challenging it. I also asked Todd, thank you very much for meeting with me today, because this is all tied to federal funding, so I think that's an important thing to let the community know too, that, he said it's about 3 million federal, and then that also has implications with state funding.
Correct. Yeah, starting in fiscal year 25, I believe that's our LTFM funding that's connected.
Okay. Then on,
Just a clarification, so is that new monies that will come to the district to be in compliance with this? So is that new monies that will come to the district? It's just monies that already exist and it's designated? Okay, thank you.
okay, then on page 2, where it's in J, where it's talking about our Title IX coordinator, and it talks about expanded duties. So my question on that was, do we have any idea how much more work the expanded duties is gonna involve for Sue?
Yes, well, I would say there's definitely work involved with that, but I think one of the changes that we're seeing in the new Title IX policy is that we have probably a little relief with it too. So the responsibilities are still there, but the way the procedures were in the final rule for 2020 has expanded on who can conduct investigations, who can be a decision maker in investigations, and prior to that was really segregated and who could do that. So in the update of 24, that's, I think, is very favorable for school districts as far as the workload. We're trying to find people that have different roles to play from the 22 voting, so.
Good, okay. And then I told Sue I was gonna ask her this question, because I was just wondering, on average, how many grievances are filed in a year, and how many of those can be the informal resolution avenue versus the full investigation?
Sure, I would say that probably 4 to 6, I'm probably gonna jinx myself when I say that, but 4 to 6 full investigations that will have been kind of the average. As far as informal, anytime something comes to us, we take it as a true need to investigate. But if we know that it's not gonna meet that, or if there's some indication that it wasn't, that it was just, I hate to say kids goofing around because it wasn't of a sexual nature, then we will work with them to find some remedies within inside the school to help them out. But if it looks like it, if it sounds like it, we investigate it.
Okay, then, I'm looking at page 6, but it's kind of in the whole policy where they're adding a gender identity to this policy. So I guess my question on that is, do we have a process for determining gender identity? Like, what is the documentation, or, how do we?
Right, so we wouldn't determine that would be the student that would determine that. So we do have our policies, our procedures, administrative guidelines that we'll work with an individual on, that is outlined in Infinite Campus for any of those changes that we track and follow. And then we have administrative guidelines for administrators to use for a variety of situations. And I think, and we do have situations come up. I think what's been really helpful for us is we are very collaborative with the people involved. I think that's been definitely a recipe for success procedures, or, yeah, so really it's an interactive conversation that's initiated by the person bringing it forward. So again, it's not that we're assigning identity or fluidity, but we still have people to support if we have questions that come up.
Perfect. Okay. Sorry. About the lactation space on page 11, do we have designated lactation space in the schools?
Yes, sorry, you're me not bad, yes.
Perfect. Okay, so then you get more into the policy, like starting on page 20, there's a lot of, so it's talking about basic requirements for grievance procedures. And then there's a lot of bolded, italicized notes and things like that that have sample, like this specific one is talking about the specific time frames. And so, like on page 20, it's got a sample set of provisions for the time frames. So are we proposing we adopt this sample set, or do we have,
Yes, the recommendation is proposed sample set.
okay.
I have a question, just the bolded areas, there are a lot of bolded areas throughout this policy. So the who, what, where, when, and why, who's gonna be responsible to get these, all these details put in place? And will then this policy be returned to the board for additional approval once the procedures are in place, or is that going to be, what's the logistics of that?
Yeah, so we would follow the procedures, for other policies, we do have a lot of these notations in, so with their approval, we usually, once they're approved, we make those kind of clerically with that and get them posted to our website.
That was one of my questions too, so. I have a lot of questions about the sample text, so that's all answered then. Okay. Oh, on page 30, that notation in bold there says the school district may choose to consult its legal counsel for district-specific sanctions and remedies. Following sample language may be considered. Has our lawyer given any guidance at all on this specific piece of it?
I think it would be situational specific, in consultation with our attorney was to approve as noted here, and if we do have a situation, we work with them to formalize, because it could be, all situations are different, so they're trying to, I think with this, to give an example of what that could be, but we would be in close consultation at this level with legal.
Thanks. Kathy?
Just a question, I think, I can appreciate Carol's question, because this is a massive policy in relation to what we usually do in policies. And it's over, seeking, some of the language within here is very subjective, like they'll say, produce this in a timely manner. And then, so, do you anticipate the district will be given leeway when the language is not specific, but it is more of a subjective, particularly when it says the, one of the process, if a concern has been brought forward that the district can informal resolution as opposed to the, and a lot of that language is very non-specific.
Yeah, I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, I think we do have leeway with that as long as we're doing our due diligence and following the information. Back to Carol's other question, depending on what the situation is, there could be, multiple people involved, there could be, timeliness to interviews, all of the situations are uniquely different, but I think if we're being proactive, taking the necessary steps and doing our due diligence, some of these can move rather quickly, and some of the situations we've had over the last couple of years take a longer time just because of the nature of what was involved or how many people might be involved, so.
One more. And then under the section for training, it's towards the end. We have a lot of staff development going on, and this is pretty comprehensive in scope as far as who is supposed to be trained for this. And we've got the training for the READ Act and everything else that da-da-da-da-da-da. When do you anticipate the time for this to be interjected in the process of staff development?
Yes, there is a lot of training. So we've done a couple of things. The last 2 summers, we've offered training for this. We did with our district leadership team last year with Brian Suppler. And then we are working with our Big 9 colleagues for all of our principals in October, I believe. Is that right, Katie? Yeah. In October to review all the Title IX updates and training for them, because they'll be part of the investigations or decision makers. So we have our principals, Sue, Katie, myself, others.
You brought up another question. Okay, the decision maker, there was an appellate decision maker, the words are big and complex. Do we know what type of position that probably, would that fall on you, would that fall on Sue, or who knows?
So usually our decision maker is Katie. So then if there's a grievance, then it works to a different person. Yeah.
Thank you.
How about staff? So, this isn't brand new, of course, but are they gonna be directed on any changes that are gonna affect them as reporters, or, where does that come in?
Yep. We have, do you wanna
Sure.
speak to that? Katie?
Yeah, so all of our staff go through Safe and Efficient Schools training each year, formerly known as just OSHA. But there are many components to that. One of the components is Title IX and sexual harassment, so we do, that's part of it, along with bullying, suicide prevention. The list is quite long, so all of the staff will get that information sent to them on the 14th. So Wednesday, and they'll have till, I want to say, November to complete that. Okay, thank you.
Other companies call that compliance training.
Call it
I
safe
did
and,
mine-
safe and efficient schools.
I did mine today for work, so it's super exciting, and it's a good reminder every year, proud that we have people do it. That was a good discussion. Anybody else have questions? All right. Hearing none. All those in favor for approving revised policy 522, Title IX, sex non-discrimination policy. Wait, what are you looking at me like that for? Did I not take a motion in a second?
No.
Oh, okay. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Yeah, I'm gonna be second guessing myself. Okay. This is a reminder that we have our school board study session scheduled for 4 p.m. on Monday, August 26th in the district office conference room. Is there a motion to adjourn? All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes.